In an interview on Saturday, and again he repeated these remarks in the lecture he gave yesterday, the Chief of Defence Staff General Chauhan accepted that Indian Air Force planes had been lost, but he refused to say how many. Numbers are not important, he claimed. But surely, if the number is as large as 5, it is important. Would you agree?
No, current numbers are important, and if numbers were not important, General Chauhan or someone else would have accepted them. The fact that there's so much of kerfuffle in India and so much of anger amongst supporters of Mr. Modi that why this conversation is happening clearly points to the fact that numbers are important. Their numbers do matter. Karan, you would remember Jaswant Singh, the foreign minister in Mr. Vajpayee's government. He was pretty clear when Air Force was to be deployed in Kargil in 1999. He said the optics of losing an aircraft is such that we should not deploy it. It is far worse, in his own words, far worse than losing a platoon of infantry. And that optics definitely remains here. Now the point is these were tactically absolutely precise. As the CDS said yesterday, there were probably 1 to 2 meters of circles of error of probability in which these targets were hit. But the point is, what was the larger strategic aim of these targets, of this targeting, of this military operation? That is still not clear. Prime Minister Modi in his speeches said it was to destroy the terror infrastructure, to kill terrorists. The CDS said it was to, there was an emotional anger among the people. That emotional anger had to be assuaged. Therefore, it had to be done. And it was not about retribution, but it was about a limit of tolerance. Essentially, the strategic goal of any such mission, Karan, has to be about creating deterrence.
So when you say that these attacks, these strikes were tactically precise but strategically ambiguous, are you saying we hit the target, but we didn't quite establish what the reason for doing so was?
Absolutely, Karan. The reason is still not clear to us. Have we established deterrence? Have we stopped Pakistan from doing this again? No, we haven't very clearly, because we're not even claiming that we did it for deterrence. We are saying we wanted to punish in a certain sense, and we want to assuage the feelings of our people. The terror infrastructure is not going to go away because you're going to hit at those 9 sites. Terrorists would have already left that place before these sites were hit. So essentially, the punishment which we're talking about it doesn't really, other than satisfying the feelings of the people and to make sure that we have done something, beyond that, it really doesn't achieve much.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Controversy about the fighter planes India lost in Operation Sindoor refuses to die down. After the Chief of Defence Staff admitted there were losses, he insisted the numbers are not important. But is that actually the case? That's the first key question. More importantly, do the losses suggest limitations that must be urgently attended to if the Indian Air Force is not to struggle in future confrontations with Pakistan? Then after that, we will focus on the Prime Minister's new doctrine of deterrence. Is there a case for arguing that it only delivers what's called the illusion of control? Those are the issues I shall raise today with one of India's foremost military analysts, the consulting editor of Caravan magazine and a lecturer at Yale University, Sushant Singh. Sushant Singh, in an essay you've written for Caravan magazine this month, you say India's retaliatory strikes following the Pahalgam attack were tactically precise but strategically ambiguous. The Modi government appeared to climb the escalation ladder without a clear plan for what came next. The use of force became an end in itself. Can you start by explaining this point further, please?
Thank you, Karan. Firstly, thank you for having me on the show. To explain this point, Karan, it's as simple as that. All these strikes that India did, the 9 on the first day, the first night, on the seventh night, they hit their targets. We've seen evidence of this. Evidence was put out by the Indian DGMO, as well as the targets which were hit on the 10th, 9th and 10th night. Some of those targets, whatever those numbers were, that they can vary because of whatever the evidence is, were hit inside Pakistan, and they were hit precisely. Now, the point is, these were tactically absolutely precise. As the CDS said yesterday, there were probably 1 to 2 meters of circles of error of probability in which these targets were hit. But the point is, what was the larger strategic aim of these targets, of this targeting, of this military operation? That is still not clear. Prime Minister Modi in his speeches said it was to destroy the terror infrastructure, to kill terrorists. The CDS said it was to, there was an emotional anger among the people. That emotional anger had to be assuaged. Therefore, it had to be done. And it was not about retribution, but it was about a limit of tolerance. Essentially, the strategic goal of any such mission, Karan, has to be about creating deterrence. And deterrence is when you have a sword and your sword does not get any blood. Whether the blood of the adversary or your own blood. Or to put it differently, Karan, there's the famous Sun Tzu quote, or the quote attributed to the Chinese thinker Sun Tzu, that the acme of war is not in fighting 100 battles and winning all of them. The acme of war is not in fighting a battle and winning it. And I think that's where the strategic aim was not clear.
So when you say that these attacks, these strikes were tactically precise but strategically ambiguous, are you saying we hit the target, but we didn't quite establish what the reason for doing so was?
Absolutely, Karan. The reason is still not clear to us. Have we established deterrence? Have we stopped Pakistan from doing this again? No, we haven't very clearly, because we're not even claiming that we did it for deterrence. We are saying we wanted to punish in a certain sense, and we want to assuage the feelings of our people. The terror infrastructure is not going to go away because you're going to hit at those 9 sites. Terrorists would have already left that place before these sites were hit. So essentially, the punishment which we're talking about it doesn't really, other than satisfying the feelings of the people and to make sure that we have done something, beyond that, it really doesn't achieve much.
So does this mean, Sushant Singh, that there was absence of clear thinking?
Yeah, clearly there is this is a political a lack of clear political thinking on our part, or probably the political thinking was more directed towards domestic political aims than being directed at strategic motives against Pakistan. Karan, in 2019 we did the Balakot strike. That did not stop Pakistan from doing Pahalgam, if we believe that Pakistan did Pahalgam. So clearly there is a limit to what these strikes can achieve. And if you go and again repeat the same thing what you have done earlier without thinking through them, then clearly this points to lack of clear political thinking, as you put it. Militarily, these guys have delivered. It's the political thinking which leaves a lot to be desired.
So the lapse is on the part of the politicians, not on the part of the military.
Definitely, the military has delivered, as we just discussed. They have delivered on those targets. They have hit those targets. It's the political leadership which should have come out with clear thinking and clear ideas, clear articulation of what they were doing.
Against that background, let me come to something that seems to be quite topical. In an interview on Saturday, and again he repeated these remarks in the lecture he gave yesterday, the Chief of Defence Staff General Chauhan accepted that Indian Air Force planes had been lost, but he refused to say how many. Numbers are not important, he claimed. But surely, if the number is as large as 5, it is important. Would you agree?
No, current numbers are important, and if numbers were not important, General Chauhan or someone else would have accepted them. The fact that there's so much of kerfuffle in India and so much of anger amongst supporters of Mr. Modi, that why this conversation is happening, clearly points to the fact that numbers are important. Their numbers do matter. Karan, you would remember Jaswant Singh, the foreign minister in Mr. Vajpayee's government. He was pretty clear when Air Force was to be deployed in Kargil in 1999. He said the optics of losing an aircraft is such that we should not deploy it. It is far worse, in his own words, far worse than losing a platoon of infantry. And that optics definitely remains here. Karan, let me explain it slightly further. For every mission, there is a certain, tolerance of losses, as the American military officers put it. Or in India's case, there has to be certain planning figure that if you go for this mission, that this would be the quantum of losses that would be acceptable, whether it is the Navy or the Air Force or the Army, whatever is going on. In this case, this figure clearly seems to be beyond that planning figure, beyond that tolerance of losses.
You made a very important point. You said numbers are important, and you added, if they weren't important, the CDS would have accepted the number. The mere fact that he's saying numbers are not important means that number 5 is so important you don't want to reveal it or acknowledge it.
No, Karan, absolutely. The fact is numbers are important. Let me put it hypothetically to you. Let's say not 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever the number is, 3, 2, 1, whatever it is. Let's say hypothetically a ridiculous number, 50 fighter jets of Indian Air Force were shot down that night. Would you still say that they were not important? You would say that they were important if 50 were shot down. Essentially, the logic is that there's a planning figure for which you go for. You say, this is the target. I would be willing to accept this much losses. Let's say, if we were capturing Tiger Hill in Kargil, we would say, I would be willing to lose 50 men for this. I would not say if I lost 500 men, I would not say, oh, this is acceptable. We have lost 500 men because we have got Tiger Hill. That is not the case. There are certain numbers are important, and they are definitely important in this case as well.
Now, you make a very important point in your Caravan article. You point out that military officials had told the Hindu that 7 of the 9 targets attacked on the 7th of May were assigned to the Indian military. This means that just 2 were left to the Air Force. If this led to a loss of up to 5 aircraft during, by the way, what was only a 25-minute operation, surely that is then a matter of concern and can't be brushed aside.
No, I agree with you, Karan. It's actually the Indian Army which was given those 7 targets, and they were hit by using loitering munition, which is essentially kamikaze drones, and by using artillery guns. That is what Dinakar Peri of the Hindu reported very clearly, saying that these 7 targets were essentially within 6 to 16 kilometers of the line of control or the international boundary. So that means that only 2 targets were left for the Indian Air Force, which were deep inside. And to lose the number of aircraft, whatever that number is, and Karan, because this number business is also, it gets too much of attention, let's tackle it once and for all. The CDS was pretty clear in his interview, categorical in his interview, saying it is not 6, what the Pakistanis are claiming. To every single Western official that you speak, whether in the United States, the United Kingdom, or any other European official, most of them hover around the number 5. When you speak to people, independent satellite imagery experts, people say that they can see evidence for around 4. So whatever number you want to take, 4 or 5, 6, clearly it is not there. That seems to be too high a figure for hitting only 2 targets. At least to my mind, it seems to be a very high number.
Now, in your Caravan article, you write, and I'm quoting you, the Modi government's refusal to come clean became a story in itself, eroding the credibility of India's official narrative. So you believe the government's credibility has suffered by not admitting the full facts of how many planes were down.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not the only one. The CDS has acknowledged that the information warfare was one of the big domains in which India was slow on the uptake in the early days. Currently, in the early days, the Pakistanis were all over the place. The DG Air Ops, or whatever that Air Marshal Aurangzeb was all over the place, showing those presentations being quoted everywhere. The Indians were completely missing in the bargain. The dominant narrative that went in the first few days were that the Pakistanis had bested us on that night and really done well. And when those questions were being raised, when they were being reported by CNN, by France 24, by Le Monde, Libération, New York Times, Washington Post, the Indian government was not willing to come on record at all and clarify this matter. So once this is established that you are not coming out with the truth on one issue, then people are unlikely to believe you on another issue. There are 2 other reasons, Karan, why I believe why the government should have come out clearly on this. The second reason is you need to prepare the public for losses. In a war, there will be losses, there will be setbacks, and there could be major losses. That's how wars happen by chance, losses happen by chance. The people should be prepared for losses. People should be told that you are fighting another professional military and you could suffer losses. And the third reason to my mind why it should have been told is that there should be a public discussion which keeps in a democratic society both the political leadership and the military leadership under check and honest. If there is an honest discussion about it, particularly once the ceasefire has been announced, after that there is no reason for us to be coy about these numbers.
And 3 weeks have passed since the ceasefire was announced. That's more than enough time for the government to be upfront and transparent.
Absolutely. The first acknowledgement in the sense honest acknowledgement has come from the CDS, and which unfortunately came on a foreign land to a foreign television network. And it could have been better handled by doing it within India by probably an open press conference where this information could have been easily told and announced, and people should be prepared for it.
Now, in his interview to Bloomberg Television, General Chauhan said, and I'm quoting, "The good part is that we were able to understand the tactical mistake which we made, remedy it, rectify it, and then implement it again after 2 days." Do you have any sense of what tactical mistake he's referring to?
So, Karan, I don't have an idea what tactical mistake he's referring to, but the same interview to which you are referring, in that interview, there's a sentence after that where he says, "We flew again after 2 days, and we flew all our aircraft on long range missions." So, what clearly it seems to me is that he's talking about on the seventh night, some of our fighter jets, or a lot of them, were flying much closer to the international border, to the probably the Pakistani air defense system, whether air based or ground based, and therefore were taken down. Current some of the stuff which we are hearing from, particularly from retired Air Force officers, points to certain rules of engagement on the first night. And this is, I'm again clarifying, this is not from any official sources. This is what retired Air Force officers are saying, that the rules of engagement for the first night, when the Indian government was clearly insisting that we are only going for non-military targets, we are non-escalatory in nature. So that clearly meant that the Indian Air Force could not take out whether the air defenses of the on the Pakistani side, or did not hit at Pakistani aeroplanes when they were Pakistani fighter jets when they were targeting us. So essentially, in that sense, those rules of engagement, where we are trying to tell Pakistanis that we are only hitting at terror targets, we don't want to hit military targets, was like the Indian Air Force was probably operating with one hand tied behind its back. And essentially, that is what probably led Indians were probably surprised that Pakistani Air Force. Karan, don't forget, the Pakistani Air Force on first night hit Indian Air Force jets in the Indian airspace. It is not that these aircraft had crossed into Pakistani airspace. So that is pretty aggressive. If Indians were taking down only terror sites, Pakistanis were actually taking down Indian military aircraft in Indian airspace. That is almost a declaration of war, if nothing less. And that would have terribly surprised Indians. And I think what the CDS probably hints at, if I go by what he says in the interview, is they were too close to the IB. They were probably their hands were tied because of the political rules of engagement, and therefore they stepped back in the later stages.
Now, in your Caravan article, you state that the Pakistani Air Force claimed that India's command loops were severed by a cyber attack, disabling the IAF's radar. As a result, Indian jets would have become isolated targets for a unified combat network. Separately, officials in the Indian military have told you that the IAF's losses had been caused by Pakistani air defenses. Does that suggest the Pakistani claim could be pretty close to correct?
I don't know. Currently, the Indian military's officials, who told me about the ground-based air defenses hitting the Indian Air Force jets, was essentially in response to this grand narrative about Chinese PL-15 missiles being fired and bringing down the IAF jets. There was this huge global narrative at that point in time that the Chinese missiles have brought down the Indian Air Force jets. And at that point in time, what I was being told by Indian military officials was that whatever losses that we have suffered have essentially been done by Pakistani ground-based air defenses, which are also of Chinese in origin, but not by PL-15, which had got this grand narrative going that a Chinese aircraft had brought down the Rafale. As far as the Pakistani narrative and the truth of that narrative is concerned, most global observers, and we have read stuff in RUSI, we have read stuff elsewhere from most neutral observers, there are big questions about how well India's multi-vendor network, multi-country imports can really combine well together vis-a-vis Pakistan's complete, China-dominated network, where it has Chinese AI, Chinese SpaceJet, and there is a sensor-to-shooter network which is at play. There is great global interest in it, Karan, because of the Taiwan factor, because this is something which the Western forces in Taiwan would have to face if there is a military conflict over Taiwan. So there's been a lot of study, lot of interest that is there, and in most cases, people are hinting towards this integrated use of the Chinese stuff on the seventh night, which probably surprised the Indians to some degree.
Now, you also write, the reported loss of advanced aircraft must prompt a re-examination of platform survivability, of tactics, and the need for better countermeasures against long-range missiles and integrated air defenses. Otherwise, you suggest the IAF will struggle in future confrontations with Chinese-backed Pakistan Air Force. In other words, we need to think very carefully, learn our lessons and implement them. Otherwise, next time round, we will suffer in a confrontation with the Pakistan Air Force.
Absolutely, Karan. Two reasons. One is what the CDS said, that we learned our tactical lessons and adapted very quickly after 2 days, and that adaptation has to be a part of it. I wrote it before the CDS gave the interview. But the second thing is actually more critical. The second part is that Pakistan and China have a collusive relationship, and the Chinese defense technology, Karan, as we discussed even in the last interview which I did with you, is already much further, far more developed, far more advanced than what India has. And if that technology is transferred to Pakistan, Pakistan would always be, if not a peer competitor, at times may even have an advantage. Whereas India, because it is dependent so much on indigenous development of technologies and is not really importing stuff, as the air chief also spoke the other day. India will have to learn very quickly because the Chinese will transfer material, equipment, technology to Pakistan, tactics to Pakistan, and that could really put India at a disadvantage. So India really needs to learn hard, because the next war is not going to be the last war. Next war is going to be a different war from what the previous one was.
So if I understand your answer correctly, the real concern is China transferring high-grade technology, high-grade planes, high-grade missiles to Pakistan, to
Yeah.
which we may not have effective, efficient counters.
Oh, absolutely. And high-grade tactics. Chinese may learn, Chinese may observe these tactics, what happened this time on the 7th, what happened on the 9th and 10th, and may learn from it, and may adapt to it, and may transfer it to Pakistan like they have done over the last 4 to 5 years in terms of joint exercises, which is where Pakistan picked up most of the stuff that it implemented on the 7th night.
Now, Sushant Singh, you end your section of that article in Caravan magazine on the downing of the Indian Air Force planes by saying, and I'm quoting you, Operation Sindoor risks emboldening rather than deterring Pakistan, which now more clearly understands the operational boundaries of Indian air power. Why do you believe Operation Sindoor risks emboldening rather than deterring Pakistan?
So, Karan, the logic is very simple. The logic is that Pakistan knows that what is the maximum that Indian Air Force can do. And I think that is essentially, once they know that, then they can go back onto the drawing board and, with the Chinese help, as we just discussed, arrive at answers to that. India really put its best foot forward. Rafale is a 4.5 generation aircraft. India put that out. And, even on the 9th or 10th, whatever India did would probably embolden Pakistan to knowing that this is the maximum that Indians can do. And if we can find a way around it, we can probably hurt them. We can probably punish them.
You also say that there are questions about India's ability to sustain a prolonged or a two-front conflict. Can you explain that?
Oh, Karan, the reason is simple. If you have the kind of losses that you had on the first night, and if you are technologically feeling challenged against a collusive threat that comes from two sides, you are definitely going to struggle against a Chinese threat. Let us be pretty clear, Karan. We have discussed this earlier. The Chinese have been flying a prototype of a 6th generation aircraft in last December. They were already flying it in air. India is going to have a 5th generation aircraft going up in 2034. We are talking about huge difference. And if you're talking about a two-front threat, the technological advantage, the tactical advantage that the Chinese seem to have, which they are also transferring to Pakistan, it really tells us, based on the lessons of the first night, that this is going to be a big challenge for India, unless India devotes lots of resources and real hard thinking into what it is going to do.
So unless India acts effectively and speedily, we may have ended up exposing to the Pakistanis and certainly to the Chinese the extent to which we can go.
Yes, but Karan, that's a downside of a conflict. If you go into war, and you will probably expose what is the best thing you've got, and after that you need to quickly upgrade, quickly learn, quickly move on to the next stage, and that's a challenge because that consumes a lot of money, that consumes a lot of energies, and that requires a lot of political will. Rather than going on and on about that how we have won and how we have succeeded, we need to focus on what to do next and really work hard on it.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Let's now come, Sushant Singh, to your assessment of Prime Minister Modi's new doctrine of deterrence. You write, this doctrine is a carefully orchestrated spectacle of muscular nationalism cloaked in the language of civilizational pride. Its three pillars project an image of strength, but in reality serve as a smokescreen for a deeper, more pernicious agenda. What is this deeper, more pernicious agenda?
So essentially, Karan, the point is this any kind of such doctrine, security doctrine, has to flow out of a strategic thought. As we discussed earlier, no, there is no strategic thought behind what is being done, and the pernicious agenda, or the agenda which is being focused by this doctrine, is essentially targeted towards a domestic audience. It is only purely about domestic audience, to showcase Mr. Modi, as he himself once characterized, as a man with a 56-cent chest, who has strength and decisiveness, to not be scared of nuclear weapons, not be scared of anything, of targeting Pakistan, of constantly being at war, which diminishes democracy. If we are constantly at war, and Karan, if people like you or me say that this is not advisable for a country like India, we essentially become enemies of the state, because you can't say this if countries are regularly at war. And what we are being told is that India is constantly at conflict with Pakistan, and India needs to constantly hit out at Pakistan without having a strategic aim. And that is why I think it's a pernicious agenda directed more towards the domestic audience than towards tackling the challenge that comes from Pakistan or from anywhere else.
Let's focus for a moment on each of the three pillars, and let's focus on them one by one. First, there is the commitment to decisive retaliation, which means the government will treat every act of terror as a declaration of war. You believe this is a tool for electoral mobilization rather than genuine deterrence. Are you saying this is a hollow commitment?
Oh yes, this is a hollow commitment, Karan. This is because at what numbers are you going to hit if three civilians are killed by terrorists in Kashmir or elsewhere? Are you going to hit out at Pakistan? Are you going to go after military targets in Pakistan? It is of course a hollow commitment, and punishment. That it is the threat of punishment, Karan, which works. So deterrence works by two means, Karan. One is by punishment. Other is by taking measures by denial, by which you deny the adversary. We should deny the adversary the ability to do terror attacks inside Kashmir by having better security and intelligence stuff, rather than only thinking in terms of punishment. And punishment for no reason, punishment for the reason of punishment, for the sake of punishment, is not deterrence. Karan, the idea is to hold the sword that I'll hit you so that your adversary doesn't do what you don't, or does what you want him to do. The idea is not to use the sword. Idea is to hold the threat of the sword. What is being done here is that I'm constantly at war. I'm going to hit you at every terrorist strike, which is essentially telling your local audience, telling your local population, your local supporters, that I am this kind of local bully which can do anything. And this is not this is not how how strategic thought works. This is not how it should be in a nuclearized environment of South Asia.
Now, the second pillar is not to give in to nuclear blackmail. However, you believe this is less about strategic resolve and more about political theater. You also say treating Pakistan's nuclear threat casually is a perilous gamble.
No, Karan, I stand by what I said. Nuclear weapons are not to be trifled with. And why it is political theater? Look at 2019 when Balakot happened. Just after Balakot, there were election rallies in which Mr. Modi went and said that हमने अपने nuclear bomb दिवाली के लिए नहीं रखे हैं. No, that's a very casual way of using of talking about nuclear weapons. Karan, every single person, starting from the Cuban Missile Crisis, would have told you that the signaling around use of nuclear weapons or about adversaries' nuclear weapons has to be very serious, very authentic, and is not to be done casually. Nuclear weapons are not military weapons. Karan, there is a reason why nuclear weapons are political weapons. Nuclear weapons are not under the control of the military. Nuclear weapons are always under the control of the political leadership. They have not been used after 1945 for a reason. They are not a normal military weapon which you use like an artillery gun or a missile. And therefore, we should be very, very careful when we talk about the use of nuclear weapons. And as Pakistani journalist Khurram Hossain said on another show on The Wire with Siddharth, he very clearly said that one man's nuclear blackmail is another man's nuclear deterrence. And in essentially in trying to call out the nuclear bluff, you might be creating a situation where this whole South Asian region may be in great trouble. What you are calling a blackmail may be actually nuclear deterrence for the other guy. So we have to be very careful in what we are talking about when we're talking about nuclear weapons. We should not trifle with them. We should not use this stuff casually and talk about them as if we are talking about some random boxing match or something.
So once again, there is lack of clear thinking at this level.
I think the more than lack of clear thinking, it is essentially being targeted at a domestic audience to suggest that the nuclear weapons, as if nuclear weapons don't matter. What I would instead say, Karan, you need to educate the people that nuclear weapons are serious stuff, but we are not trifling with them, but we have space within the nuclear umbrella or within the nuclear shadow or within the nuclear threshold to do stuff. But don't trifle with it. Don't treat it casually. Don't try and tell people that nuclear weapons can be used. Karan, the downside of this will be that tomorrow you will be under pressure from your own supporters, from this, the kind of crazy media landscape that we have, where people will say use nuclear weapons because maybe you have lost 10 aircraft or 5 aircraft or a platoon or a company or whatever. You can be unlucky in the next round of conflict, and you could be in a situation where people might be urging you to use nuclear weapons. We don't want to end up in a scenario where you have told people that nuclear weapons can be used casually. That is what essentially I'm pointing to.
Finally, you believe that the third pillar of Mr. Modi's doctrine of deterrence is the most troubling of all. We're talking about the refusal to distinguish between terrorists and their sponsors. Why would you say it's the most troubling?
Two reasons, Karan. One is that it takes away it takes diplomacy out of it. It is within the every terrorist group or every single terrorist in Pakistan or elsewhere cannot be controlled by the Pakistani army to the fullest extent. They would have some autonomy at some point in time, and it is there that the diplomatic space is arrived at, and you can use that diplomatic space, whether things like FATF, Indus Waters, or other stuff to actually coerce Pakistan or to get the desired results from Pakistan. That is clearly not happening in this case. And the second thing is what Mr. Amit Shah, India's Home Minister, actually said about Bengal CM yesterday in Bengal. He said that she is criticizing Operation Sindoor to win the Indian Muslim vote bank. Now, essentially, that means that Indian Muslims are opposed to Operation Sindoor. So this whole equation of Pakistan, Islam, terror, Indian Muslims, that is what this line of thinking clearly points to, as Amit Shah yesterday said. And this is my big worry. Rather than uniting the country, rather than bringing the country together, you are dividing it on religious lines. You have seen BJP ministers in Madhya Pradesh, a BJP leader in Karnataka. You have heard other officials talk about other BJP leaders talk about stuff which should not be spoken. This is not about Hindu-Muslim, that Muslims equal terror, or Indian Muslims equal Pakistan. This is much bigger than that. This is about a country which is an adversary, which took a different path 75 years ago. Another country, India, which took a different path, and we are actually helping the Pakistani cause if we have leaders who are talking like this.
Let's end the interview, Sushant Singh, by coming to your conclusion about Modi's doctrine of deterrence. You write, Modi's doctrine substitutes the spectacle of strength for the substance of security. It promises justice but delivers only the illusion of control. Are you saying it's an attempt to pull the wool over the eyes of the Indian people?
Nobody can pull wool over anybody's eyes unless the other person is willing to have the wool pulled over their eyes. So I would not go there. Karan, okay, let me put it slightly differently to you. Karan, there are three factors here right now. We live in South Asia is nuclearized. Both India and Pakistan are nuclear weapon states. Secondly, what this recent Operation Sindoor has shown us is that technological advancements have taken place to a very high degree, where you saw the aerial conflict on 7th, whether it is the precision guided munitions that India was able to hit on the 9th or 10th, or the massive use of drones, air defenses. That means that these technological advancements mean that the window for diplomatic intervention and the pace of escalation is very high. If you are living in a nuclearized region where this pace for escalation is very high because of technological advancements. Out there, if you into this very combustible mix, you put this very jingoistic, hyper-nationalist narrative where that we have won or we are superior and we are going to punch hard and we are going to do this the next time around. You are creating a very combustible mix. This is essentially where the problem with this doctrine is. You already have nuclear weapons. You already have high technological advancements which have reduced your window for diplomatic maneuvering or otherwise, where you can do serious damage, precision damage. And on the top of that, you are doing this very hyper-nationalistic, jingoistic kind of behavior, which is actually, rather than bringing the temperature down, rather than bringing the crisis down, is actually escalating the crisis. And you don't know what the next round is going to be like.
Is this why, Sushant Singh, you say of the doctrine, and I'm quoting you, it risks tearing apart the very fabric of the country it claims to defend? That sounds like a very worrying sentence, but is this the reason why you say that it is building up religious polarization which will tear the fabric of India?
Yeah, Karan, yes, right. The kind of speeches that we have seen from some BJP leaders, and as I said, the Union Home Minister talking about Muslim vote bank, and West Bengal CM opposing Op Sindoor, clearly points to some kind of a portrayal where the opposition or support for Op Sindoor is based on religion. The fact that the terrorists who killed those people identified people on the basis of religion and killed them should not allow us to actually target Indian Muslims, or to say that Indian Muslims should be identified with Pakistan or with terrorists. And that is a genuine fear at this point in time.
And this is why you believe it risks tearing apart the very fabric of the country it claims to defend?
Oh yes, that risk is definitely there, Karan.
Sushant Singh, thank you very much for talking to me and sparing time to explain and discuss in detail your essay for Caravan magazine. I'll underline the point you made a couple of times. Numbers are important. The CDS is wrong, or at least is misleading to claim they are not. I think that's a very important sentence, which I think the government must take on board and be honest about to the Indian people in the future. Thank you very much for this interview. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you so much. As always, lovely talking to you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.